can see. Put a 1 in the chat again and down.
Okay, so I should be back on? All right. Can you guys hear me? Can you see me? If you can put a 1 in the chat box or just say, I can see you. Anyone? It's working? Hey, all right. Shut that door. Can you shut those curtains too? That'll help a ton. All right. Are we back? All right. So everyone pressed 1. You can hear me? You can see me? Want to wait? Give me a second. Sorry, guys. Thank you for being patient. This is the first time we're actually messing with this this webinar software, and so far so good. Okay, awesome. All right, so I had this amazing introduction too. I mean, you missed it. Like it was really, really good. So let me try to capture magic in a can again. So here's what happened. Welcome to the 7 Purpose Drives webinar training. My name is Matt Brauning. If you obviously you know me because you either went to my event and got an email from me for this, or you're one of my Facebook friends. I decided to put this out for a few extra people, so feel free to join in. So here's what we have. At our event last weekend called Venture, it was a business event for entrepreneurs all about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And what I found is we ran out of time. I just overly believed how much content I could do. And let's be honest, I also overly believed how short I could make it. Turns out that I'm a long-winded talker and teacher. So by the end, we had to cut this piece out, but I promised it to you and I wanted to deliver it. I'm a man of my word. So I asked if we could share it in a webinar after the fact. So here's the training. Let's rock into it. So this is called the 7 Purpose Drives. And here's what I found is I'm working on a new book called The Purpose-Driven Entrepreneur. Purpose-Driven Entrepreneur is really all about not so much the entrepreneurs like being passionate and purposeful in what they do, although that's important. The purpose-driven entrepreneur is about what are the purposes that drive every entrepreneur to do what they do, to start their enterprises. And in researching the book, I just started looking at stories. And I'm still knee deep in stories, and I'm looking for origin stories, right? It's just like in the comic books, one of my favorite parts of every character story is the origin story, right? Where did they come from? And as I began to research, where did these different businesses come from? I looked at my own business and several other people's. Patterns began developing. And what's interesting is every time I hear a story, the origin story always falls into one of only 7 categories. One of only 7 categories, or a combination of those categories. So what does that come down to for us? Well, I think it's really important to realize if you understand the purpose behind what's driving you at the unconscious level, why did you start your enterprise or why do you want to start an enterprise? You can either be aligned with it or misaligned with it. If you're misaligned with it, what that means is you might think you're in one purpose drive, but the truth is under the surface, you're really doing it for a different reason. And I mean, I don't know how many of you enjoy someone who says one thing but means another. And as humans, when we see that incongruity, we want to steer clear from that. So if you find a business owner that has that incongruity under the surface, right? They say one thing, that they desire one thing, and they say, this is why I'm doing this business. But under the surface, there's a different reason. The cool thing is, even if you're not aware of it, it still is going to impact things. So if you understand what the 7 purpose drives are, you can begin to get clear, well, which one or combination of one is really driving me, is driving why I started my business. And then 2, once you know that, you can realign yourself. You know, like if you started with a contribution drive and then you kind of got off the mark somewhere, went off the rails, you can correct and bring yourself back. Does that make sense? You can bring yourself back and say, wait a minute. What is the vision here? Why are we really doing this? So that's what the drives are all about. I hope this is interesting for you. Honestly, we're probably only going to go about 20 minutes, maybe, give or take. I will have some time at the end for some Q&A, so be thinking. If any questions you have at all during the entire training, just pretend like this is a live room. So my buddy Justin's in here in our recording studio. He's monitoring the chat for me. I don't see it, but he's checking it out. So what we'll do, if you have any questions at all, pretend like we're a live room. Instead of raising your hand, just put a question in the chat box and throw it out there. And then at the end, I'll take a look, and if we can answer a few of those questions, if we have time permitted, we will get to that, and I'll have some Q&A with you. Cool with that? All right, so let's jump into it. Let's hit the first slide and let's talk about what the 7 drives really are. All right, are we on? Look at that. You can see that. So now you can't see my face, right?
Correct.
No one can see my face? Can you put in the content in the chat bar if you miss me already? Anyone miss me yet? No? Okay, good. I'm looking to see if they miss me. Hopefully they do. All right, cool. So 7 purpose drives. Let's let me give you a quick overview and then we're going to get into each one individually. So I named each drive and I kind of gave every drive has a thought or a because behind it, right? So we have the ego drive. We have let me make sure it's in the right order here. We have, because I may have shifted them around from my book here. Okay. So the first drive is the ego drive. Ego, like my own personal ego. We have the artist drive. We have the world impact drive, contribution drive, spiritual drive, what I call the survive, thrive drive. That's a fun one. And then the final one, and this is the most controversial, yet the most prevalent, the anger revenge drive. So this is not your normal, everyday, positive thinking seminar. I guess it's also important, I'll mention at this point too, a lot of what we teach, whether it's NLP or it's spiral dynamics, which is value systems for cultures and people, a lot of what we teach isn't as much things that I thought of or things that, oh, this is my new system. This is my 4-part something or other. They're really meant to be observations. So as I look through the data and I just look and we're still, again, forgive me because I'm still in the middle of it. I'm still gathering more feedback. I'm getting more stories. And I'll ask this too. If you're watching this right now and listening to us, if you know of any cool origin stories of businesses or entrepreneurs, please share them with me. You can head to my Facebook page and share them with me on a message or a post at Matt Brauning, Facebook at Matt Brauning, Instagram at Matt Brauning, Twitter at Matt Brauning, or you can just email us at support@evolutionseminars.com. Probably a little much for the chat box, but if you just send me a quick email or a social media message, man, I would love that. So if you're privy to a cool story, I might use that as an example in the book as we work on that. So that said, give you some grace. This is a work in progress, but I plan on working this out with you. So let's get into the first one. So the first one, and understand how this shows up. So the first one is what I call the ego drive. And we're on that slide. Boom. So this is the entrepreneur that has something to prove, something to prove. So think of it like this. There are business owners that the reason they're getting into business is because they want to prove something. There's a couple of reasons for that. Very often, shockingly, there's been business owners who felt unworthy growing up, or they came from a place of they came from abuse, they came from foster care, they were given up for adoption, and the story they told around that was that I was unlovable. And when people grow up in those sorts of hard times, sometimes the solution they find unconsciously to become worthy again is to build the ego, right? And it's a really normal human thing. We want to, and even if you work somewhere, right, or whatever you do, I want to do things that are cool. I want to go places that are cool, or I want to start a business that's cool or successful or big. And ultimately, you might say, well, I'm starting this business because I want to provide for my family, or I'm traveling around the world because I want to see other cultures. But if you look deep inside, very often, not every time, but often, there might be the ego drive in that. And all that means is the real reason they want to travel is because they can say, look how cool I am that I traveled. Now, they would never tell you that. And the real truth is, if that's you, you might not even recognize it. Right? There's conscious and unconscious drives. Your conscious drive might be, hey, I want to go travel the world and have a good time. But the unconscious or not conscious of drive might be because you want to build your ego. Now, I'll also say, as I'm getting into this, that all of these drives are not good or bad. What we want to look at instead is what are the results that they provide? What is the fruit of the tree, right? You can have an ego drive and do some great work. I don't have a specific example yet. That's one of the things I'm working on for like charities. But I know there's been charities that have been created out of ego drive, but they do a lot of good work and good support for people. So Just because something is one drive or another, don't try not to make them positive or negative. They just are. Okay. So one of my favorite examples of ego drive is Rupert Murdoch. Now, Rupert Murdoch, interesting fellow. He owns the news group, one of the largest media moguls, if not the largest one in the entire world. Now, he was an Australian guy. He grew up in, I think, Adelaide, I believe, in South Australia. And his father owned a newspaper down there, real small local newspaper. And when his father passed, he took on two newspapers that his father had, and he took over the production and the marketing of them. Now, interesting story about how Rupert went into changing the way we sensationalize news. He was really one of the fathers of sensational news stories and what we are today, which I would say is pretty far from news. But that's kind of that's another topic, right? He started looking at, well, how do we sell papers? And when you just reported the facts of what happened, nobody bought. But when he began finding the most sensational stories and putting those as the headlines, and I would say Rupert Murdoch is probably the father of e-commerce. E-commerce meaning internet marketing, email marketing, a lot of the things that people are doing, Facebook ads and things like that online, really all came from Rupert Murdoch. It's about how do you drive a click? Well, for his day, it was how do you drive a newspaper buy? And the headline is going to get you to say, I need to read what's on the next page. And it seems obvious today, but man, 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, that didn't exist. Newspapers just had news. So long story short, Rupert Murdoch, as he was growing up, one of the things he said about his childhood was his father was a loving father, but also he somehow realized that things were never quite good enough. So if he got good grades in school, his father didn't say, oh, good job, you did just perfect. There was always a higher demand, always a higher expectation. So at one point in his life, he finally, essentially, in his mind, he said, you know what, Dad, I'll show you. And when he took over the newspaper, he said, I'm going to build it to greater lengths than ever before. Another phenomenal case of this, and this is my favorite part, and probably Justin's too, Vince McMahon. Vincent Kennedy McMahon, who is a third or now fourth generation promoter he owns the WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment, formerly WWF. That's right, pro wrestling. So there's a lot of reasons why you might be a promoter and run a wrestling company, right? His father, Vincent Sr., owned a regional territory. They were all broken down in territories across the U.S., and he owned New York and kind of the eastern area there. And Vincent Sr. did pretty well with it. But what's interesting is when you hear stories about why Vince Sr. and why Vince Jr. Ran their promotions, they're two very different drives and reasons. The wrestlers, the old school guys, would always share stories about Vince Sr. and about how much he cared about them. And not to say that Vince Jr. doesn't care about him. And sorry, Vince, if you're listening right now, I'm sure you are. I know you hate Vince Jr. See, one of the things that I find fascinating is he doesn't want to be called Jr. He wants to be Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And even off the record, right, off TV, he doesn't like the Jr. He wants to be someone different. So anyway, fascinating stuff. Point is, Vince Jr. cares about the people, but he had this dream to take his father's territory, his father's business, and he wanted to be the one to make something of it. He wanted to be the one to blow the vision out of the water. It wasn't about really the contribution. It wasn't about he loved the business, although he does. It wasn't about giving more jobs to people, although it was. It wasn't about having the good life and having a private jet, although it was. See, these purpose drives, when you really look at the heart of it, although there's many reasons why we do things, there's usually one overarching reason truly why we do it. At the head of it all, if you gave all these different reasons, scales of 0 to 100, the one with the highest is probably the bucket that your drive really falls into, which purpose drive it is. So I'd say for Vincent Kennedy McMahon, it was the ego drive. I'll share a little bit more about his father in a second, but for the ego drive, big time, man. He wanted to take a company public, and he did. He wanted to make a superior product. He wanted to compete and beat out the other guys. See, what's interesting is competition isn't really one of the drives. Competition is going to fall into one of two drives, either the ego drive or the anger revenge drive. It depends on what the reason is. Do I want to beat them out and be the better man, woman, whatever? Or do I want to beat them because I want to drive them out of business, so to speak? So there's always one or the other. So Vince, although he drove a lot of promoters out of business, his outcome was never to drive them out of business. Again, at the time, there was 50 some odd regional promotions. They were all in small geographic areas. And as the story goes, Vince was kind of like the Walmart of pro wrestling. He came into small towns and said, we have this national territory. And this little guys, quote unquote, got driven out of business. The truth was he had a superior product. He had a lot more money into it. And virtually every one of them, if not every one of them, he offered to buy them out. He offered to bring them in. He's brought in many of the old school people that used to promote, gave them jobs. He wanted to build something big. And the net result of that was a bunch of these little guys were going to go out of business. So again, right or wrong, that's for you to decide. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It probably depends on your perspective, right? If you're the little guy or if you're the mogul. But nonetheless, I can say that is a clear example of ego driving, wanting to make something big and wanting to have a big name. He wants to be famous, and there you go. So that's the ego drive. All right. The second drive is the artist drive. The artist drive. Now, this is where you find people who start a business that sometimes doesn't look like a business. Very often it's someone who's a perfectionist at heart. So if you find yourself being a perfectionist, you may have a huge artist drive where you just want to do things better than someone else, not to beat them, not to be awesome, just because you want to make something beautiful. You want to do something right. You find a lot of artist drive literally in artists, sculptors, musicians, graphic artists, even technology people can actually fall into the artist drive. I think Steve Jobs partially falls into artist drive. He also falls into the next one I'll talk about. But when you look at Steve Jobs creating a computer versus a Bill Gates looking at computers, Bill Gates said, great, how do they function? And Steve Jobs says, yes, but is it beautiful? Right? He wants it to be done right, to be done nice. So ask yourself, the product or service I do is part of what drives me to do this because I just want to have a great product out there, or I want to have a superior service out there. I find myself a little bit in most of these, and you probably will too. For me, when I think of the seminars and workshops we run, the part of me that has the artist drive is when I'm on stage and I'm having the interactions with you guys. When I'm speaking, when I'm having an intervention, when I'm doing a coaching session, like what we're creating as a workshop experience. I always I'm not the best at it, and we always mess something up, and that's okay. But the artist drive in me always wants to create an experience that is just an amazing experience. And whether, again, I go about it right or wrong, and we all have our opinions on that, and we're entitled to an opinion. My heart is I want to make it beautiful. I want to make it a great experience. So whether it's an idea, whether it's music, whether it's whatever it is. Now, unfortunately, if someone has too high of an artist drive and too low of everything else, what you might find is very often in their business, they're broke. Some people focus too much on the art and too little on everything else. Again, you find that a ton in the painter, artist, musician community, the people that we truly say we are quote unquote artists. The people who, chefs, right? In a restaurant could be an artist drive. They open a restaurant not because people want it, not because the food's going to sell. It's because they want to make this amazing food. And sometimes the trap that you might fall into is those people might be more in love with the idea of creating their art than the idea of actually selling their art, or the idea of who wants their art, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So, all right, that's the artist drive. All right. And I'm going to remind you again, if you have any questions or thoughts, or just if you have any random thoughts, just put them in the comment box. If you have any feedback, put it in there. If you have any specific questions, please type away and make it as long or short as you want. And again, at the end, I'll take a look and see if we have any. Do we have any questions coming in yet? Keep working on it, buddy, and we'll get that moving. All right. Number 3, the third purpose drive is the world impact drive. World impact drive. So let's talk about this. These are business owners who are they very often think into the future and less in the present. They're considering, as Steve Jobs so aptly put, he said, I want to leave a dent in the universe. And I use that quote a lot. I just love it. Um, it puts things in perspective, right? It's that theory of, you know what? I want to make an impact. I really want to leave something behind. And understand that it's not a legacy of I want to leave something behind so people know that my name was Steve Jobs. I want the world to be a better place or to have changed because I was in there. Now, could this show up positive and negative? Absolutely. Um, when you look at something as horrific as terror attacks, I go back to 9/11, remembering that day. Um, and I have to believe that a big part of the people perpetrating those things was a world impact drive. They're saying to themselves, what is bigger than even me? And it's not that I want to be remembered, is that I want to make an impact in the world that goes into the future far beyond me. And so on the far, far negative side, you have things like that. On the far positive side, you have people like Steve Jobs, who, there's a reason why he's transformed multiple industries. He didn't just reinvent computers. He reinvented the music industry. He reinvented the phone industry. He reinvented the animation and movie industry with Pixar. The guy has looked at everything and said, how can I impact and change the way things are done? And, read his biography. It's fascinating. And everyone will attest to the fact that he was driven, he was driven by the artist. And I'm making this up right now, the percentages, but I'd say he was probably driven maybe 70% world impact, 30% artist. You're entitled to your opinion. It could be way off from there, but something like that. He had the perfectionist in him that he wanted something to be great and done well and just perfect and beautiful. But the bigger mission behind why he started Apple, why he eventually came back to Apple, why he went to Pixar, why he did everything he did was to make the impact in the world, to change the way things are done. You look at a Henry Ford, right? Same thing. A big piece of why he was doing cars is because he looked at how things were doing, and he didn't just say, I want to make a buck, right? And it's okay if you make a buck, but Henry Ford didn't say, I want to make a buck. He didn't even say, I want to make all the bucks. He said, I want to change the way transportation is done. And I believe we have the chance to do that. So into that. And the third one I'll give you is Elon Musk. And I think he's a very, very hot topic nowadays. If you don't know who Elon Musk is, he founded SpaceX, which has the plan to put the first commercial passenger space shuttle into the space station, right? That's what they're looking for. So he just has these big dreams, literally about it comes back to change the way we do things, change the way we do the world. And then also, he started several different companies, sold his companies. First one was to Compact Computers, made a bunch of money, was big in PayPal when eBay bought PayPal. He owned 11% of PayPal, so he's done fairly well for himself. He started a little company called Tesla. That's probably the most famous one. So, but step back and look at the things that this person is involved in. Although he's made a lot of money, you can tell instantly it's not about the money. For Elon Musk, and I'm not in his head, I've never spoken to the man, but I look at the pattern of the ventures he was in, and he always wanted to be on the cutting edge of something. He always wanted to bring a change to the world. So even, being a part of a venture with PayPal, what is that? It's like, well, let's make an impact in the way we transact with money, changing banking. And again, you like PayPal, you don't like PayPal. Depends on your perspective. We can have a whole conversation around the banking industry, right? And we'll talk about that. But you can't argue that PayPal changed some of the ways we do things. Tesla truly is one of the major markers nowadays, especially, that is changing something in automotive. Now, will it last? Will it not last? I don't know, right? I'm not going to argue the merits of a particular car company. But what I'm saying is everything that he did, founded, jumped into, ventured on, had the potential of a world impact drive. Hope that makes sense. And obviously with space travel as well. So those are examples of people that you take the money away from them, they'll find a way to fund it and make more money. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the impact. It was about the mission. It was about the future of the world. It was about making a mark, right? So that was the World Impact Drive. All right, we're cranking through. Next one up is the Contribution Drive. Contribution Drive. Now, this one is interesting. It's almost a lot of people think they have a contribution drive and they don't. And some people don't think they do and they might. So here's a couple examples. So contribution drive is simply this: because I truly care. All right, because I truly care. The first test is whether you made money or not doing this, would you still do it? It's a good test. Now, I think we're in an interesting time in the world when you don't have to be stuck either doing something for free or making a bunch of money and being selfish. There is a lot of space in the middle ground these days where you can create an enterprise that makes a difference. But again, it's not so much do you contribute, because most companies contribute. Like when you think of companies that contribute big time to the world, what's the first name that comes to your mind? Probably Pepsi, right? Oh, wait, no, probably not. But do you know that Pepsi contributes more money to charities and nonprofits than most other companies because they have such a huge revenue? And they do that. But we don't think of Pepsi as a contribution-based company, right? Although they make big contributions. So these purpose drives are behind, again, it comes back to, I'll say it one more time, what's the leading force? What's the leading force that drives you to do the things you do, to start the thing in the first place? So I don't think Pepsi started, they didn't start Pepsi so they could contribute to the world. They started, I don't know what I'm going to research. I haven't researched it yet, but let's figure out why Pepsi got started, right? Contribution Drive is about a company that really started things because they knew they wanted to make an impact. Not a world impact, although obviously it could be big, but they wanted to make an impact somewhere with contribution. They wanted to take care of something. They wanted to give charity. They wanted to make a difference somewhere, right? To care for someone or something. So here's a couple of examples that come to mind. The first one is a man named Blake Makowski, who started Tom's Shoes. Now, Blake, as he says in his book, he was traveling around the world, traveling to Argentina, and spending a lot of times in some of the smaller villages, and found there was, most of the kids didn't have shoes. And that's cool. We're in, rural village. There aren't a lot of shoes necessarily. But what he noticed was some of these villages they weren't really sanitary. So when you're walking around with no shoes, they'd get infections, they would get cut up. It wasn't like this beautiful grass village. It was actually dirty and dangerous. And certainly disease. So he said, man, like if they had shoes. And I'm a big advocate for going into third world or into the village atmosphere and bringing them what they need based on where they are. Meaning, like, I don't want to bring in my ideals. I don't think we should bring 10,000 air conditioners to the people of Fiji. I think they might look at them and put their TVs on top of them or something. They don't know, they don't necessarily care about that. Maybe they do, but so like if nobody wears shoes and you give everyone a bunch of shoes, they're not going to start wearing shoes all of a sudden. Same thing happened in, I go to Fiji. We did a lot of work in Fiji over the years. And I love the people there. One of the things that people tried to do there was bring dentist work. And when you get to know the village people, what you find is there's a lot of people who are like, even when the dentist came, they don't want to go because they're scared. They don't trust them. They think it's this weird Western thing. They're not really into it. So it's about bringing things that they need, and if they don't, bring in an education to potentially. So I'm sure I'm stirring up all sorts of stuff. If you're in the nonprofit sector or you go into third worlds to do work, I'm sure you have opinions on that as well. So when it comes to the contribution drive, back to Tom's Shoes. What he did is he saw these kids who didn't have shoes, and it seemed like they really wanted shoes. So he went back home and said, man, how can I get shoes on these kids' feet, right? How can I do that, right? And he thought the normal thing everyone does. Well, I could start a nonprofit, and I could ask people for donations, then I could get shoes, and we could get people to donate all their old shoes, and then I'll send them shoes. But that'd been done before, and that was just your standard, hey, we just You know, let's like Red Cross does that or whoever else does that, right? And you can collect old shoes and give them shoes. But he thought, I really want these kids to have new shoes, but also I don't just want like old Nikes because there's something to when if you've ever been to a third world place and you see everybody walking around with like Diesel and Hurley shirts and Nike shoes, and there's something about like they don't even know what the brand is, but they know it was a hand me down. So what he did is he came up with the concept of Tom's shoes, not just the concept. I'll talk about that in a second, but the design. And the design was an Argentinian design. It was this I never remember how to pronounce this silly word, but it was this like moccasin slipper style shoe. I'm sure someone right now is yelling it at their computer screen at me right now. Or you can Google for me and put it in the chat box. But it was like this moccasin design that is so obviously Tom's shoes that if you've seen those. So the first thing he did is he went in and said, what's the culture and what do people already wear? So I'm going to make a shoe that kind of resembles that. The second thing he did, and I think this is fascinating, he decided to make a for-profit company rather than a non-profit company. Now, there's mixed reviews on if this is a good or a bad thing. I love it. I think it's great because for me, that means Tom. You know why they call it Tom's, by the way? It's called Shoes for Tomorrow. It's where Tom's comes from. So the dude's name is not Tom. But Blake, when he started Tom's, he came up with the 1-for-1 model, which if you're not familiar with, it means if you buy a pair of shoes from Nordstrom's, then Tom's Shoes is going to donate a pair of shoes to a kid who doesn't have shoes. So it's a 1-for-1. Every pair that's bought, another pair gets donated. They sell 10,000 pairs. They donate 10,000 pairs. Now, I don't know about you, but like Pepsi doesn't have a 1-for-1 model. There's like a lot of companies don't have a 1-for-1 model. And I think that's pretty darn cool. So is it a nonprofit? Heck no. He makes a ton of money. But he sees the vision that the more shoes we can sell, the more kids we can put shoes on. The more money we make as a company, the bigger impact we can make and the more we can contribute. So the thing that drove the starting, right, was the contribution drive. The thing that continues on, do you think there's other drives? Certainly. There's probably some Thrive drives and some different things in there. Like, again, none of these generally exist purely on their own. And I'm trying to highlight some companies and some founders that seem to be stronger in one versus the other. But the truth is, there's probably 3 or 4 drives that play into Blake's business and Tom's Shoes. But I think contribution was definitely what drove the start, and I think still what drives most of the business as well. Another example is this is a really cool company. It's called trashybags.org. Trashy Bags. So check it out. Like open up another browser or something. Check out trashybags.org. TRASHY, trashy bags. And Justin, tell me if you find them, what geographic area they're in. I don't remember off the top of my head. Org, yeah. So Trashy Bags is real simple. It started off small and it's gotten larger and larger. And what they do is they go into this area that needs massive cleanup, and they grab all the plasticware, plastic bags, trash that's all over the ground. So they do 2 things. It's really neat. First thing they do is it's contribution driven because the whole purpose of this company is to clean up the area. But what they do is they made a business out of it where they employ local people and they pay local people, which is brilliant, to take this trash to go through a very minor recycling process. They just kind of prepare the plastic bottles and bags and everything. And then they make bags out of them. So they'll make like purses and backpacks and handbags and things. And when you get one of these trashy bags, is it trashybags.org? Did you find it?
I'm looking it up right now.
Dude, come on, man. How long does it take to look up trashybags.org? Someone on here already has it probably. Put in your chat box. Do you know where it is? What's
trashybags.org?
Tell me when you know the city or the area. So when you buy a trashy bag, you know that you bought a trashy bag. All right. So when I have my handbag, you might even see like an Aquafina label off to the side somewhere because it's all built into the thing itself. So I think it's cool. I think not everybody wants that, but I'll tell you what, if I want to say, yeah, you know what, I want you to know that I helped to make a difference. And I also, if I use a handbag like that, you're going to say, what in the world, where did that come from? And I'll say trashybags.org. I bought it from them. Here's what they do. And I'm going to perpetuate the story. So I think it's really cool, but that's the contribution drive. So could they make money from it? I don't have a problem with that. I don't know if they do or they don't or how much, but if they do, I think that's great because for these guys, the more money they can make if they actually make enough selling these bags. One is they're not taking any resources out of the world because they're actually taking just trash and leaving the rest of the resources, trees and whatnot. They're also employing a bunch of local people, so they're giving them jobs. So it's this kind of thing where they saw a problem and they wanted to fix the problem. And they came up with an entrepreneur idea to fix the problem. How cool is that? That is cool. So that's contribution drive. You find it or no?
It's a Ghana?
Ghana. There you go. So it's Ghana, West Africa. Ghana, West Africa. So it's beautiful. So check out trashybags.org. And there's, countless others that fall in that same category. All right, let's move on. We got three more. Geez, and I want to crank these through for you. Number four or five. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Counting is not my strength. Spiritual drive. So number 5 is spiritual. And the thought behind this is God is bigger than me. So I think clearly you can understand someone who decided to, instead of starting a business, they decided to plant and start a church. Well, churches, and you may know, my wife and I helped to lead a campus of one of the campuses of our church. And church is really interesting because although it's not a business, there's a lot of function that operates very similar as far as you have to have systems and leadership and people and everything else. So there's so much of church life and business life that overlaps together. Although there's not really a product. But what drives someone to say, you know what, I'm gonna found a church? Well, is it possible that some people founded a church because of ego drive, because they want to be the center of it? Absolutely. Is it possible they wanted to do artist drive? I know one person in particular, he's a really cool guy, a pastor in Orange County, that it's very obvious. He started his church. He founded it because of the artist drive and the spiritual drive. Let's be fair, it's both things. But this is my opinion of it. The artist drive, because he had been in church leadership and been an executive pastor in many different mega churches. He saw what had been done and how it had been done. And he thought, gosh, I would love to see it done this way. He had this artist look where he wanted to make it beautiful and to do it a particular perfectionist way. So there's some artist drive in there. World impact drive, it's possible. Contribution drive, absolutely. But the spiritual drive is the person who says, you know what? It's not about how many people I have, how famous I am, how much the tithes are, whatever, all those things. What was it about? It's about God's bigger than me, and I believe I have a calling, so I'm going to do this thing that God put on my heart, and I'm going to found a church. And if you're listening to this and you've ever planted or started a church, man, it is not glorious, and it is hard work. I mean, it is eventually glorious, right, to give glory to God, but there's a lot to go into it. It's a big sacrifice. So whether it's what goes into starting a church, I look at someone like a Mother Teresa, talk about a spiritual drive. Now, you could say Mother Teresa had a contribution drive, and I think that, again, that's part of it. She had a heart for people. But a big part of her, for lack of a better term, I'll call it organization. But for Mother Teresa's organization, the nuns she worked with, she had a lot of money donated her way, a lot of things. She had houses, beds, all these things. But Mother Teresa was very simple. She would say, God has tasked me to take care of these people, and I'm going to. And it wasn't as much, and hear my heart, please understand, hear what I'm saying and don't hear what I'm not saying. She cared about people, and she cared about doing God's vision. But I believe, my opinion is that God's vision was ahead of anything else. She said, God ordained me to do this, and I'm going to do it. And that's why I will take care of the people. Did she also care about the people in need? Absolutely, right? But that drove her to do different things. For instance, here's a fascinating Mother Teresa story. She was known, they were donated a house at one point that were going to have a whole bunch of seniors and handicapped people in all physical handicaps. And they wanted to take care of those people. So the first thing she did, she went through the house and went with the people and said, okay, if this is our place now, again, hear the heart of this. It's so fascinating because she cared about people, but she cared about the bigger picture more than anything else, right? She was very much about what does God want us to do in taking care of these people, and let's make sure we take care of these people. So she went through the hall and she would do things like, she said, we need to rip out all these plush carpets. There's all this nice carpeting all throughout the hallways. But this is going to be really hard for wheelchairs and for hospital beds to go through. So we just need to get rid of all this stuff. So she was happy to have it very plain. No ego. It didn't matter how, even like the nuns walking around, it was like, well, that would be nice to have, more comfortable padding under our shoes. But the purpose was higher than just one person's comfort. She said, we are tasked to take care of all these people and to love them and bring God's love to them and to help them. So we need to do this in the best way possible. Another thing she did, this is a funny story. She went through that same house and took out like half the hot water heaters. This is a really big house, right? It's going to house, I don't know how many people, but probably 50 or 60 or something like that. So kind of a mini hospital almost. So they took out half the water heaters. She said, we don't need that many. We'll have enough so we can have hot water when we need to. We'll have hot water for cleaning dishes and for the patients, people here to shower. But she said the nuns and myself included, we don't need hot showers. Like that's just a luxury. Let's not use the resources on that. Let's use it for what God's asked us to do. So I think those are great examples of again, maybe not companies, but certainly there are some companies that do that. A couple come to mind. I won't mention a name in particular, but there's a credit processing company that a good friend of mine worked for. That it was a Christian credit card processing company. And what the founder said is, he said, you know what? There are so many companies out here that just have to work with whoever they have to work with. And he said, I want to make sure that if there's, and again, agree or disagree, it's, that's a opinion. It's a great conversation to have. But I think it's fascinating that the reason he started that was because he said, believe that God wanted him to help take care of these Christian business owners. So he chose to just work with Christian business owners. And I think that's fascinating. Something he also said is he drew a line in the sand and said, I will not do merchant processing for, the porn industry or the, different industries like that in various ways. He doesn't, and again, whether you agree or disagree, he wouldn't do like alcohol processing. He wouldn't do a lot of those types of businesses. And he just said, I want to do this thing because I believe I'm supposed to, and I believe I'm going to bring light to that situation. So that was kind of interesting. What else was there? I thought there was one more I was going to say. There's the merchant processing. Oh, and we just ate at this bakery, and I'll throw a plug for this in San Juan Capistrano, right by the Mission and the railroad station. It's called 316 Bakery, I think. And again, same thing. You could say, so it was a Jesus-centered bakery, and pretty neat. But ask the guy, why did you start this? Was it to make something great? Was it to make a bunch of money? Was it for the artist of, and he said partially artistry, because he loved to bake and he wanted to make cool, cakes and cookies and things like that. But he said, he said, I wanted to bring Jesus to the marketplace. So for him, it was a spiritual drive that founded that. He believed that he was supposed to bring this out and let more people know about Christ. So good for him, pretty cool. So that's a spiritual drive. There's certainly other spiritual drives. It's not just a religious thing, and it certainly shouldn't, I don't mean just like, it isn't even a religious thing. It can be whatever the spiritual thing you're doing. If you believe that something spiritual is happening in the world, that you're a part of it, whether it's the universe or a particular religion, or I would say even atheist, if you start something that's an atheist-based movement, I would say that's also a spiritual drive, because what's pushing the need to do this or get this product or idea out is the belief around the spiritual or lack of spiritual belief. So that's the spiritual drive. We'll talk more about that. And as you can tell, I'll be fleshing that out more in the book, of course. All right, number 6, almost there. Number 6 is the survive, thrive drive. So this is the drive that I think a lot of businesses fall into, especially in the e-commerce and internet marketing world right now. There's a lot of push that this is the people who say, man, I want to have the good life. I want to start a business. Why? So I can have freedom, so I can make enough money, so I can take care of my family, so I can have vacations, so right, whatever it is. It's generally a selfish drive, and I don't mean selfish as good or bad. When I say selfish, I simply mean centered on oneself, right? Nothing more than that. And I think there's times and places to do that, and times and places that maybe we don't need to. But sometimes the difference between survive and thrive depends honestly on usually where one is coming from and where they want to go. So there's some people who are going to start a business or a movement just to get by. They need to provide for their family. They feel stuck. They're in a job that they hate. They're maybe you're working 70 hours a week and you can't take anymore. I've known people who are working full time, driving Uber at night and on the weekends, and they want to start a business desperately, some kind of a something that they can begin replacing some of the income so they can finally start to get above water, pay off debt. They can provide for their family. They can eat. So some entrepreneur movements are started out of the survive drive. But if you continue through that or past that, you have the thrive drive. Same thing. This is just more in a, hey, I'm already surviving, but I want to have the good life. So I start a business so I have more money. I can get a boat. I could drive a new car. I could live, where I want to live. I could send my kid to the school I want to go to. All those sorts of things, right? And again, there is nothing wrong with wanting to have a good life, right? So even though it's funny, we spent all this time talking about the ego and then talking about artist and world impact, the reality is the vast majority of businesses out there in the world are survive, thrive, drive businesses. They're businesses that started to make money. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's kind of what business is about, right? If you're not making money in your business, it's just a hobby. So just consider that, right? So whether it's for freedom, whether it's providing for your family, whether it's to succeed, and ultimately the question is, for you to be in survive, thrive drive, especially the thriving one, it's why do you go to work every day? Why did you start this in the first place? If you started it to make money and be successful, that's the thrive drive. If you want to be successful so you could prove something, so you could be worthy, et cetera, that's probably going to fall more into ego drive. If you want to be successful to get this beauty, this song out there, this new way of doing things out there, it's probably artist drive. If you want to be successful so you could change the way we travel to space, right? That's probably the world impact. If you want to be successful so you can get more shoes on kids, probably contribution. If you want to be successful so God's mission is heard in the world more, that's spiritual. You get the idea. But thrive and survive is always going to be self-oriented or selfish. Please don't run away from selfish. It can be a good thing. And I think most of us, probably most of you that are on this webinar right now, you probably could use more of that in your life. All right. And the last one and the final one, the anger revenge drive. Oh my gosh, this one's so much fun. So the anger revenge drive is, oh yeah, I'll show them. And this is the one that I shared in the beginning of the webinar. This actually has the most examples. Everywhere I looked, it was shocking how many people started their businesses out of the need for either they were angry about something or they wanted to show somebody or get revenge on somebody. So since this is the most fun, let's talk about this one now. All right. So let's look at something like, let's look at a Greenpeace. On the surface, a lot of people would say Greenpeace is a contribution drive or even a world impact drive to stretch it. And I just don't think that's true. Although there is contribution Greenpeace does, every interaction I've ever had, every piece of marketing material, what you'll find with Greenpeace is very often it's things that are happening out of anger. Basically, they're like it's an environmental group that founded because they saw the environment being destroyed in different ways and said, we need to stop that. So we're going to create this Greenpeace that's going to fight against the big businesses, fight against all that stuff. And do you notice that? It's a subtle but very large difference between, gosh, I want to help these trees versus I want to stop these tree cutters. Makes sense? There's two very different methodologies to that. And Greenpeace clearly has taken the stop the tree cutters route rather than save the trees. You don't find Greenpeace saying, let's have a tree planting rally. They say, let's have a stop the tree cutting rally. Now, you could argue to say both are needed or one is more important than the other. That's your opinion. And, we can all have our opinion on that. No big deal. But definitely it tends to have more work against versus work for. So we could talk about that forever, but that's Greenpeace as an idea for anger. Dyson, this is fascinating. So Dyson, they have fans, but they're most famous for their tornado vacuum cleaners. So do you know how Dyson got started? Well, the dude, Dyson, had a vacuum. And after he got the vacuum, they had to go get new vacuum bags. And he realized that you couldn't just use any bag. You had to use the specially made vacuum bag. And it pissed him off. He thought it wasn't fair. He was like, are you kidding me? Now I buy your vacuum for $60 or whatever. And now I have to buy new vacuum bags for $30 for a 3-pack. And for the rest of my life, I have to buy your vacuum bags. Like, that didn't feel fair at all to him. He didn't like it. He thought there must be a better way. So he went to work on this new technology that was like that cyclone kind of tornado-y looking thing. If you've seen those vacuums before in Target, like, where just it sucks everything up and there's no vacuum bag. It's just a canister. And then when it gets full, eventually you knock out the canister. And there's a small little filter, and you can wash the filter, you can knock the dust off the filter, and you just reuse it again over and over and over again. I love those vacuums. I have a vacuum like that at home. And what's funny is he put out this new Dyson vacuum model, and it was the only bagless vacuum. But he founded it because he was pissed at the vacuum industry and that they all required people to buy more bags. And that's how Dyson started. And then once it finally hit, everyone fought him on it because you can imagine, right? It's like, imagine buying a printer that doesn't need ink, right? The printing industry is going to be pretty pissed about that because ink costs more than the printer sometimes, right? So that was the same sort of methodology as, let me buy a vacuum that doesn't need a bag. It's like, what? That's impossible. And then, fast forward, 5 to 7 years, and now basically every vacuum company has a line of vacuums that have the same technology. So those are some of like the anger drives. That makes sense. It's the idea of, I see something that is unjust. I see something I don't like, and I want to change it. I want to fight it. I want to give a better alternative. It's not just businesses. Social movements are very often out of anger or revenge. Not as much revenge, but mostly anger. And that's one of the problems I have right now. I don't want to go into this as a topic, maybe for another day, but so much of the social movements that are happening today, the marches and whatnot, it's like, I'm the first to agree that so much of what's been happening is wrong, right? Whether it's the sexes or racism or whatever it is, it's like, I think we can all say, yeah, that's pretty much wrong. And there might be a few, nut jobs out there that are like, wow, blah, 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 they're part of it. But I think most of us rational people say, yeah, of course that's wrong. I don't like that. And there's always two ways to approach it. Again, don't take my opinion for it. Just look at, these are just the drives, right? If you see a social injustice, certainly fighting it is an option. And sometimes you do need to fight it, right? And that makes sense. Rosa Parks had to stand up and say, I won't go to the back. Right. And that's certainly, like, sometimes that's what in the, Tiananmen Square, when he stands in front of the tank, like, sometimes you have to stand in front of the tank. But there are other times and other options where you don't need to stand in front of the tank. When, like Buckminster Fuller, one of my heroes, I love this man. One of my favorite quotes is, don't try to fight the existing model. Just build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. Right. So essentially, it's the email saying, I'm not going to ask for permission to outdo the fax machine, nor do I need to fight the fax machine. I can just make email and people will begin to use it. So sometimes there are other ways to do it. However, I just find it interesting that seems to be the biggest drive for most social movements today, at least, and during the political year. I mean, what was what do you think the purpose drives behind most of the political discussion last year? It's almost exclusively been anger drive, or even revenge drive, and mostly anger drive. Did you hear the candidates talking about contribution, world impact, artist, ego? Certainly, you could argue that. Spiritual, right? Even survive, thrive. Like, they talked about it, but really the drive was anger. It was this is absurd. I don't like this. Not my president. All that sort of stuff. And I'm going to do something that fights that. So, just consider, if the movement or the business that you have is founded in or is driven by the anger of something, Are there appropriate times for that? Again, absolutely. But are there potentially inappropriate times for that you don't need to have that? There's a better way. So just something to consider. All right. Hopefully I've pissed everybody off thoroughly just even talking about the subject. You can say you just say social injustice today, and if I just put on my Facebook social injustice, then I'd probably have like 690 comments, and everyone would talk about all sorts of topics that I never brought up in the first place. So have at it. That's fun. So let's talk about revenge, and we're going to end with this. This is the most fascinating one. And it's 4:00. We had 5 minutes of technical difficulty, so I'm going to shoot to end in the next few minutes and see if there's any questions came through. So revenge. Here's a few revenge drives. Lamborghini. The founder of Lamborghini was a tractor mechanic, and he knew a lot about farm equipment and tractors. He walked into a Ferrari dealership, and he had the privilege of actually meeting the founder of Ferrari. It was a while back, and the owner of Ferrari was there. And as the man checked out the engine and the specs, he gave him some advice, and he said, "Hey, I like your car a lot. And man, there's a few things that you might consider changing that'll make it perform a lot better. Are you open to that?" And the guy kicked him out of his store. He said, essentially, and this is in Lamborghini's words, he said, like, "I'm not going to take advice on my sports car from a tractor mechanic, right? Like, who are you to give me advice? Get out of my store. Don't even try to come back." So he said, "I won't." And he literally walked away saying, "You know what? I'll show him. If he won't take my advice on how to build a better car, maybe I'll just build a better car." And literally, Lamborghini was born out of revenge to show Ferrari that you suck and that I can do it better, right? So sometimes revenge, oddly enough, can be a great motivator, and it can give us superior products, right? So, I mean, you start a chat, which one's better, Ferrari or Lamborghini? I don't know. I can't imagine having either one, and it sure would be cool. I don't care. Just, you can give me either one. I'm happy, man. I'll be a happy camper. But I think it's neat that revenge can actually spark healthy competition. And although the business owners, it can be tough to compete back and forth because they're trying to revenge on each other. But who ultimately wins in that? Sometimes it's the customers, right? We can get a superior product because they're trying to outdo each other. So pretty cool. Disney is a classic one. Maybe you've heard the story of Walt Disney. His first cartoon was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And so funny. So he goes in and does this pitch meeting with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. It doesn't go well. They said it's a terrible idea, and then they stole the idea and used Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. So he heads out. He got stolen from. He's pissed. He's taking the train home, and it was just horrific. He didn't know what to do. But on the train home, he said this to himself: "You can have the little bastard." And as he said that, he began sketching out a little mouse with red velvet trousers held up by two buttons. He called him Mortimer Mouse. Eventually, his wife said, "Baby, I think that's a terrible name for a mouse. Have you considered Mickey?" So Mickey Mouse, one of the most, what's the word I'm looking for? The most well-known, famous, iconic, that's what I'm looking for. One of the most iconic characters in the history of the world, Mickey Mouse, right, was born out of revenge because Oswald got stolen. And I just think that's fascinating, right? So he decided, I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to make things happen. Disney, of course, started out of revenge, now makes somewhere around $60 billion a year. Fun fact, randomly to round this off, 2006, the Walt Disney Company finally bought back all the rights to Oswald from Universal, who owned them at the time. So it was, what is that, like 50 some years later, they bought back Oswald, I think, just as we want him. Because for a long time they tried to and they wouldn't sell. So anyways, so that's Disney. So some people didn't know Disney was out of revenge. A couple more, I'll give you one more big one. Puma and Adidas. So if you realize this, but Puma and Adidas were each founded by brothers, German brothers, and they each have a factory in Germany. Well, the brothers started a shoe company, and they had differences of opinion. It got really bad. They stopped talking to each other. Sides of the family split. They decided who to go with, and there was an all-out family war. They were mad, and to get revenge on each other, one of them started Puma, and the other said, "Screw you," and started Adidas. And I didn't realize this, looking back, but if you look at a Puma or an Adidas shoe, they are scarily similar, right? Very, very similar look and style and feel, but they're always trying to outdo each other. And they actually set up factories like blocks away from each other. Or it might even, don't quote me, it might be, I gotta look, it might be in the same block or like, but it's in the same city. Like two shoe factories in the same city in Germany is kind of like unneeded, but they have two shoe factories making the same basic shoes right next to each other, and it's two brothers trying to outdo each other. So that's the anger revenge drive. There's more to that story as well, as you can imagine. So let's recap. We have anger revenge, we have survive thrive, we have the spiritual drive, contribution drive, world impact drive, artist drive, and we started with the ego drive. So, and let's come back. Let's put the webcam back on so you can see my funky mug. All right, cool. So I want to end with this. Is first off, like, thank you so much for coming on to this. I hope this makes sense. I hope it gave you something to think about, something to ponder. I leave you with these few thoughts though. Just ask yourself and question, which one of these 7 affects me the most? Which one of these 7 is the major contributor to why I started my business or why I'm starting something? You probably have more than one, and that's okay. But be honest about the first one, the main primary one. Look, if it's thrive as a drive, if you're not honest about it, it'll be weird. It's like it's conflicting, and you'll try to make this like contribution based thing. You're, hey, Tom Shoes, I'm making a 2-for-1 thing, but people will see that really you just want to build a great shoe company that's successful. And is that okay? Of course it is. So if it's really thrive, then say so and make it known and be okay with that. If it's really contribution, make it okay. The second thing I'll say about it is your purpose drive can become what we call your plumb line. So like for builders, they'll use a plumb bob, and the plumb bob is like if you're going to hang something, or not hanging, but from the ceiling down to the ground, you'll hang this plumb bob, which is just a weight at the end of a string, and that'll get you. So I can put a post right here and hook it up to the ceiling right up there. It's a true line, right? It's the line that everything needs to go with. Another example of construction is a chalk line, right? If you're going to lay bricks, you're going to put one end like a tape measure and then bring a string that has blue chalk all the way to the other end. And then you pull it up and snap it back down, and it makes a straight and true chalk line across any level ground. So if the ground goes up or down, or you have to go around something left and back right again, if you know what your plumb bob, you know what your chalk line is, you'll always stay to true north. All right, you have to have that line to follow. So if I know that I am contribution drive, and that's my plumb bob, every decision you make 5 years from now, 10 years from now, rather than making decisions only based on whatever's in front of you, you can always come back to that original line and say, hang on a second, what's our true north? We're here to make this contribution. Tom's Shoes is supposed to be about shoes on kids' feet. So what is that about? Should we do this new thing or should we not? And maybe they'll make more money, but they'll end up with less shoes on kids. So what do? Well, they might decide not to do it. So decisions you make ideally can be made in alignment with your purpose drives, therefore keeping you on your true path. Hope that makes sense. Hope that helps. Justin, do we have anything that came through that we want to talk about and address?
A couple questions. Do you want to look at them? Or read them to you? Or?
Yeah, read them away. Let's do that.
Wes. How can we use the knowledge of the 7 drives in ourselves and others? You may have addressed that.
All right, good. So question from Wes was, how can we use the 7 purpose drives in ourselves and others? And I probably did sort of address that over time. But again, just kind of coming back to it, remember that these drives, although the book and the information is about entrepreneurial movements, but remember I said it's also about all movements. It's about really anything you do. I mean, goodness sakes. So just consider what other context can you apply it to? Why do I want to start a family? Is it thrive to have a good life and provide for a family? Is it contribution? Certainly for some people. I have pastor friends of ours that adopted 2 children, and a big part of their family is literally contribution drive. They saw kids that didn't have a home, and it broke their heart, and they wanted to help. And they adopted 2 children, one at a time, a year apart. And then they had a chance to foster these 3 boys. And it was like there were 1, like 4 and 6, or 1, 3 and 5, something like that. And they fostered the boys. The boys got taken back away with a second chance, which was horrendous because it didn't work out well. They came back to the foster system. I believe God worked a miracle because their case should have been closed, but instead of being closed, the foster agent said, or the caseworkers called them and said, listen, this never has happened. It should have been closed and they would have gone to wherever else, but somehow your case was still left open and that was a mistake. But would you be willing to take the boys back? And they said, of course, without missing a beat, yes. And then they asked, what's the possibility of adopting? And they said, well, we can work on that. So several months later, they were able to adopt those 3 boys too. So their whole family was a contribution drive family. So they have 5 children. They provide a loving home. They're tremendous parents. And all 5 children were adopted, and they created their family out of a drive to help what was going on out there. So hope that helps, Wes. So whether it's looking at why you do your family, I have another friend that, it's a spiritual drive for the family. It's all about how can my wife and I, and how can our kids grow closer to God? How can we serve together? What our family's here to advance the kingdom, as we say in the church life, to help, serve God's vision in the world. So you can apply any context or any organization of people and look at this purpose drive through that. So hope that's good for Wes. The question?
Yeah, there's a second part to Wes's question,
all right.
And then there's one other question from Carlos we'll get to too.
All right.
If you have time.
Yep.
Wes asked also, what if you don't particularly identify with any one of these drives, and then where's the that seems fun drive?
All right. So Wes, he's my buddy, and I know you. So the question was, what if you don't relate to any one of these, and you relate more to a that seems fun drive? Interesting, buddy. I got no idea. I think you're probably an enigma for sure, as far as that goes. But I'd ask you this too, is it's not so much, these aren't drives for just why you do just everyday things. Make sure you think about it through the lens of, I'm going to start a brand new business. I'm going to start an enterprise. I'm going to create an organization. I'm going to do something that's bigger, take a lot of my time. Because for me, say I want to take a new class. I took a comedy class. I know, Wes, you did like a ice bath class, right? Where you learned how to control your body temperature into super, super cold. You probably looked at it and said, that seems fun. I know it wasn't for ego. I know it wasn't for all these other things. You probably just thought that sounds fun. I took a comedy class because I thought that sounds fun, but I wouldn't start a comedy club. See the difference? If I started a comedy club, why am I doing that? Probably for the art, or was it for another one of the reasons? So just consider that most likely if it's something larger like that, it's going to commit a lot of your time, emotions, energy, resources, you probably aren't going to take away from your family and do all these things just so you could just go, that seems fun. That being said, if it really was just purely fun, it's probably the artist drive or a version of that because you just want to do the thing that it's about. All right, last question, and we'll get you guys wrapped up. We got 2 minutes.
Does the book address dynamics at play when dealing with the different drives? For example,
actually, let's leave it at that, and I'll talk about that. So, great question, buddy. So, does the book talk about what the different dynamics at play when drives essentially can they come in conflict with each other or interacting with the different drives? Yes and no. No, because I don't have enough research on it yet, but yes, I'm going to for sure. That might be in a second edition or it might be in the first part. But yeah, I think that's a huge thing. What I need to do is I need to find more case study or at least examples around when one business interacts with another one. The challenge with it too is what are the different contexts where there's interactions, right? So like, it's not so much like, oh, well, I have an ego drive and my wife has an artist drive. So how do we deal? Because these aren't personality traits and they're not even communication models. They're deep fundamental drives that probably have values associated with them. But at this point, the way I'm explaining them is they're drives that are driving us to do what we do as far as starting a business, creating something new. It's not just driving us to do something. So a couple of potential places you could look for conflict would be maybe in owner and employees, right? If the owner maybe has the ego drive, but the employee thinks it's supposed to be contribution drive, certainly there'd be conflict in that. And that also does sort of come back to having the real true drive deep also be the same drive at the surface, right? So imagine going to work for Tom's Shoes and you got sold the idea of contribution drive and that they're all going to be shooing the children on the street and having, helping make the world a better place. And then you get in there and Blake talks about nothing but numbers, and board meetings are about profits and how can we get the shoes cheaper for the kids, and how can we make more money for us, and do they want to make profits more? Probably. But if you got in and realized it was actually all about the money and it had nothing to do with the kids, you'd probably have conflict and feel weird about it. So so that's some of the places I would think between employees and owners, or between partners maybe. I definitely have seen that a lot, where partners break up. But ultimately, I'm not going to be able to answer the question of what types of conflicts show up between which ones. But keep an eye out, looking forward as the book and more material comes out. And I'm sure that's going to be part of the discussion. All right. So hope that helped a little bit. Hope the Q&A was fun. It's been 75 minutes. So if you're still with me, I just want to say I appreciate you. I thank you. I'm glad you were on here. And yeah, this was just awesome. If you have any questions about this, I want to refresh your memory as well, that if you were in venture from a week ago, this last weekend, and that's why you're on here right now, how's your life going? How's business going? Are you cranking and moving forward? I will mention something to you as well. And I thought about this long and hard, and I realized that I have kind of another chance to connect and teach you guys something. And certainly I wanted to take advantage of doing that. Also, I realized that at the live event, you probably know we offer you can do our NLP training with coaching, and we have a whole program called NLP Mastery. We also have a mentoring program called Pinnacle Partnership. And those are two different places where you can plug in, train with me, work with me and the team over the course of a year in your life, whether it's for personal or for business. But we also have an option that some of you thought, I really want to be a part of that, or I want to learn NLP, but it's a little bit much for right now, or I can't commit to that much time or money or whatever. So I just wanted to mention there is an option. If you're interested, just reach out and let us know. We have just the home study group coaching option, which comes with our NLP practitioner home study material, which is the manual flash drive with the audio and the videos of all the demonstrations. Plus, you get to be part of our group coaching for a year, which means you get a 90-minute call with Q&A every single month, one of the head coaches, including me as well. I'm at some of them. Mike runs that entire process, but all of our coaches will jump into those group coaching calls. They're very, very productive, very interesting. We teach a subject for a bit, and then we have open coaching where you can ask questions, and we give coaching to you, and everybody benefits from it. So you get 12 months of group coaching. You also get added to the private Facebook group, which is for daily and weekly group coaching. So you can put any questions you want anytime, and me or one of the coaches are going to go on, interact, and give you resources and answer the questions. You can also support each other as well and find out what people are going through and get feedback that way. So you get part of the Facebook group for daily interaction. You get the monthly group coaching, 90-minute calls with open Q&A questions, and you get the entire home study material. The whole thing, instead of $10,000, it's $1,995. So it's $1,995. There's special paid in full prices. If you are interested in that, and if I'm saying this to you because hallelujah, you finally have a way to jump into NLP as a starting point, and it's much more doable time and finance wise, just reach out, let us know. You can either comment here and let me know, and we'll connect with you privately, or you can email support@evolutionseminars.com and we'll get back right away. Or you can just hang up right now and call me. Call Jeremy. He's in the office right now, 949-835-4335. Can you put that on there, Justin, just so they have that? 949-835-4335. So you can call, you can email, you can send pigeons, smoke signals, whatever you want to do. Or you can just comment in the box if you're interested in getting started with coaching with us. That's a great way to start. Also, if you want to do NLP Mastery or Pinnacle down the road, nothing's lost. That's part of the bigger program. So you can actually apply every cent to a future program that you decide to enroll in later. All right. That's it for me. Hope this was valuable for you guys, and I certainly had a great time getting through this. Thank you for bearing with me as I'm figuring out our technology, figuring out even what all of this content looks like. The next time I teach this will be at the next venture in February. So hopefully I'll see you all there, and I'll see you all very soon down the road of evolution. Have an awesome day. Peace.